1. Back in 2008, I got my first job in retail. I was a shop assistant on a deli counter, and I loved it from the first moment I set foot there. This is in one of England's main supermarket branches, and not a bad place to work either. So anyway, it was about 2 weeks since I started this job that I had met my first angry customer. Now, to set the scene, I have to briefly explain that our storage chiller was opposite our hot food counter, a few yards to the left. A design flaw due to this supermarket buying the premises from another and it being refitted on a budget, but I digress. Us deli staff had to occasionally serve on the hot counter to cover for breaks, etc., and vice versa. So one day I had gone to the chiller to get a fresh ham for the deli and came out to see a customer waiting at the hot food counter. So I served him and grabbed my ham and proceeded to my station. It was there that hell was unleashed upon me, in the form of a chavvy bitch with a peroxide 80s hairdo, standing in front of the snacks section of the deli. Before I could open my mouth to greet her, she said, "You were ignoring me. I was here first and you went and served him first." "I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't realize."
"Don't give me that. I'm going to report you."
"Okay, ma'am, shall I get the manager for you?"
"No, you can stand here and serve me."
"Okay, ma'am, what would you like?"
"Have you got any of them curry things with the stick through 'em?"
Bugger this, I thought. I'm going to wind her up. What she was trying to describe was chicken tikka wraps in a burrito-style wrapping, with a little stick skewered through to hold them together. I thought she must know I am new here and is going to play ignorant. "Yes, ma'am, you mean satay stick, right?"
"No, the curry chicken things with a stick through 'em."
"Oh, you mean kebabs, yes. They are on the hot counter, ma'am."
No, they're chicken curry with a stick through 'em."
By this point I had run out of snacks on stick options to offer her, knowing full well what she wanted. So I finally said, "Oh, chicken tikka wraps, yes, I know. Let me just check out back for you." So I went back to the chiller and took my time to count the boxes of tikka wraps we had in stock, which I might add I was about to put on the counter before Chav Bitch arrived. I then went back out, not bringing any of our ample supply with me, only to find her ranting at the manager. She pointed at me and said,
"It was him, he was ignoring me."
The manager waited for me to say, "Sorry ma'am, we haven't got any," through a simpering smile. Then she left. I turned to the manager and said I wasn't ignoring, before he clapped his hand on my shoulder and said, "I know, mate, don't worry about it. You're doing a great job." 2. One summer while I was in college, I worked at a semi-local supermarket. I say semi-local because there's more than one location, but only like one more. I'll refer to the place as Podunk Major. I'd been working in the deli for a few months, and the place just drained my soul. I'm a socially anxious artist and writer, so a creativity-free food service job was pretty much the opposite of what I should have been doing. Still, the job gave me some money, and I used it to buy a then rather recently released Nintendo Switch and Breath of the Wild. I guess you could say that's a bit of a form of compensation for the story I'm about to tell. While I hated my job there, I'm the sort of person who desperately wants to please everyone. So I put my all into what I did. I wasn't particularly good at it. I often forgot the numbers and locations of products and had to consult my notes as to how to make the different sandwiches. But I was polite to both the customers and the other employees. One fateful day our store was particularly busy. We were selling sliders and coleslaw at the wazoo. We kept all our meats and cheeses in the back, and whenever a customer wanted something that wasn't in the display stand, we would have to retrieve it from the cooler. It is important to note that the cooler can always be opened from the inside. It is impossible to lock anyone inside the cooler by simply closing the door. This is important. There was an older woman working there at the time who I'll call Grumpy. She'd been working there for years, and apparently the cooler hadn't always had such safety precautions. She'd been locked in overnight once. As such, she was a bit wary of being inside them. She knew that these new and improved coolers couldn't lock her inside as they had done before. But, as an anxious person myself, I can understand hanging on to pointless fear. In consideration, the other workers always left the door to the cooler open while she was inside. Now, as I said, the deli was particularly busy on the day in question, and I'll admit, I am not free from blame in this story. I had apparently closed the door while she was in there. In my defense, You couldn't always tell when someone else was in that frigid meat box with you. There was a small segment around the corner where people often went to retrieve chicken limbs for the fryers. On top of that, we'd been getting complaints from management that because so many people didn't properly close the door, the temperature in the cooler was far higher than it should have been, putting the food inside in danger of spoiling. Annoyed by the assumed carelessness of my co-workers, I'd closed the door behind myself after I'd gone in to retrieve some meat for a customer. I hadn't known that Grumpy was in the cooler. That was, of course, until I was cutting said meat. While I was using the deli slicer, I heard a sudden whisper in my ear.
"If you even close the door on me again, I'll kill you."
Quite a thing to say while someone's operating the food service equivalent of a table saw. There was no levity in her voice either. She sounded deadly serious. Now I have the emotional resilience of wet cardboard. When I was done with the meat, I went into the cooler and started crying. I was terrified. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before. A short while later, a sweet old lady who insisted everyone call her Grandma found me. I told her what happened and she comforted me. She told me to tell our manager, but I refused, saying that I didn't want to start any trouble. Grandma told me that she'd been like me once, and used to let everyone walk all over her. She said she really thought I should tell the manager, but respected my decision to keep quiet. I eventually pulled myself together and went back to work. I was still, however, terrified. I kept my distance from Grumpy. This was fairly easy while she was in the back, but she eventually came to the front. I didn't want to be anywhere near her, as I was still quite scared, but didn't want to risk being trapped in the cooler. I didn't know if she would make good on the whispered threat. In that particular podunk major, the deli and bakery are connected. I waited in the bakery while Grumpy occupied the front of the store, trying not to cry. After several minutes, she walked over to me and angrily asked me if I was going to do any work. Now, from my perspective, the woman who had just threatened to kill me was storming over to me and being rather aggressive. I backed away and, not knowing if I could handle being near her, truthfully answered, "Maybe." My tone was, of course, quiet and shaky. This further aggravated Grumpy, who told me that she was going to get the manager. I must have started crying again because I remember being comforted by another employee. I told her the story, and like Grandma, she advised me to tell the manager what had happened. So when the manager finally arrived, I recounted my side of the events. The manager, likely knowing how shy I was and seeing how obviously this was affecting me, said she'd get Grumpy to apologize. A few minutes later, she returned with the aforementioned woman, and told her to apologize for threatening me. Grumpy, however, had other ideas. She said hotly that I knew not to close the door on her when she was in the cooler. I stammered that I didn't know she was in there, and she scoffed at the explanation, saying that wasn't an excuse. She then said that she told everyone she'd kill them, which, by the way, she didn't, and certainly not in such a quiet, serious voice, and said that I needed to grow up and deal with it because I was a big girl. I was astounded. Being unable to control my emotions has always been a sensitive subject for me, so that really hit me where it hurts. The manager, seeing that her plan was quickly going south, shooed Grumpy away back to the deli. She assured me that she told Grumpy to apologize, and had no idea she was planning to insult me after she had threatened me. Luckily, my shift was almost over, and I was able to go back home soon after. My parents complained to the store, as I was still unwilling to. I hate conflict that much. We were scheduled on different shifts for a few weeks after that, and I think she eventually apologized sans insult. I heard that soon after another employee closed the door on her while she was in the cooler, but she'd apparently learned her lesson and didn't threaten or insult him. I quit the store when I went back to school, but since I live in the middle of fields and nothingness, there's a horse pasture across from the store. I occasionally have to go back in there. I avoid the deli section like the plague. 3. First, let me say that I am a woman, not relevant to the story, just setting the stage. When I was in my late 20s, I was working at a pet supply store, i.e. not a chain store, that only sold high-quality pet foods and supplies in Central Florida. It was my first week there, and so I was still in my training stage of employment. I had had several years of experience working with animals, but this was my first retail job in this field. One day I was at the register area, which was at the front of the store by the entrance, with one of my co-workers, a sweet girl that was 17 years old at the time. There were no customers, so we were just talking and waiting for someone to come in. An elderly gentleman came in, and as was the store policy, my co-worker went to greet him and ask if there was anything she could help him with. I didn't hear what they said, but watched them talk for a moment before she turned away from him and started walking towards me with a stunned, slightly horrified look on her face. I was confused. This gentleman she was talking to looked like the grandpa everyone wished they had. Gentle seeming, not threatening in any way. What could he possibly have said to freak her out like that? She came over and whispered to me, "You're gonna have to help him." Nothing more, just that, and she kept walking away kind of in a daze. I mentally shrugged and walked over to him. "Hi, how can I help you?" This sweet, grandfatherly gentleman looked at me with a slight bit of concern on his face.
"Hello, I have a small toy poodle, and she's the first female dog I've ever had. She's just gone into heat for the first time, and I'm wondering if you sell tampons for dogs. She's bleeding a little bit, and I've heard that tampons are comfortable, and I don't want her to be in any pain."
I did the long, slow blink, and tried to keep my expression blank and pleasant, while in my head I'm alternately shrieking in laughter and completely horrified. This lovely man was serious. I had to restrain myself from instinctively asking, "Do what now?" I could not express enough that this man was very kind, very polite, and very concerned about the welfare of his beloved little pet. He legitimately thought that dogs had pain and discomfort during their cycle like human females do, and he didn't want her to suffer in any way. I mentally shook myself, thinking, "Okay, woman, you're a professional adult, and you can handle this tactfully." "Well, sir," I said, "dogs really don't need things like that. They spot a little bit, but she's not in pain. If you're worried about the spotting being messy, we do sell a type of diaper with sanitary napkins for incontinent dogs or females in heat." I showed him the products in the different sizes and patterns of fabric. I demonstrated how to fit them on a stuffed plush dog we had for that purpose. He thanked me for my help, purchased a diaper and a small toy for his little pooch, and left. My young co-worker wandered back over after he was gone and just looked at me and said, "Holy shit." I glared at her. "You're an ass, you know that, right?" I said. She just laughed uncomfortably and shook her head. I was thinking that this was not the end of it. I was going to pay her back for this someday. And I did. But that is another story I'll share if you want to hear it. With that, I thank you for listening. 4. This story is from the point of view of a male. Names are remembered from the best of my recollection because I don't care. I just moved to the big city by my lonesome. After a few months of job searching, I landed a gig doing casual work for a large supermarket chain's liquor store. This was no small feat. Getting a job with them is actually quite tricky. I had learned some tips somewhere that I should mention during the Q&A that I would be thrilled at delighting the customer. If a product they wanted wasn't there, to offer them a close alternative. That red wine is made by incorporating the twigs and leaves of the fruit. I actually researched about how alcohol is made. On my first day, I was greeted by my new boss, John. He was 50-something, had greyish hair, glasses, and what looked to be white, almost transparent eyelashes. He was the man of few words type. I mentioned the town I lived in previously. He remarked that he'd been there once, and wouldn't be in any hurry to return. I wasn't either, but for all he knew, I might have had a fondness for the place. Another co-worker was a younger guy, closer to my age. His name was Nick. He had some Arabic background, dark hair, heavy-set guy with a chewing gum attitude. The first time I saw him, he swaggered up to a fellow co-worker, handing him a few dollar bills as though he had lost a bet. People do that in real life? It was as though his attitude had been learned from TV. The co-worker he handed the money to was a Chinese guy named Terry. He had glasses, seemed to have an air of professionalism, but when you got too close, you could smell halitosis. At the time, I was an undiagnosed sufferer of ADHD. Whenever somebody would give me verbal instructions, I'd appear to be listening to them. But in my head, I'd be bouncing from one unrelated thought to the other. This inevitably caused me to ask question after question. This would annoy people, and I'd appear to be slightly stupid. Oh good, it's that stupid annoying guy again, is how I imagined my coworkers viewing me. When it came to serving customers over the counter, I was a nervous wreck. Nick told me to take the money first, then put the bottles in the brown paper, and then into a plastic bag. Terry told me to do it the other way. I was always scared I was going to break the bottles, so I handled them with great care. I made snails look fast. After I had started, shoplifting had risen, but my thoughts were if they could do it without me noticing, then good on them. Every time Nick mentioned the drug ice, John would start laughing. "Maybe that guy was on ice," Nick would quip. John would cackle uncontrollably every time. I never even found it slightly funny. "The lotto's on tonight. Whoever wins it can afford to buy a whole bunch of ice." I'd mentally roll my eyes and sigh. John would try to compose himself. An example of a Nick conversation would be, "Last night this hot Asian chick picked me up in her car at King's Cross. I never seen her before. She said it wasn't even her car, and she started doing coke in front of me." What was I supposed to say to that? As the days went by, John didn't seem to have a growing fondness for me. I'd enter the store and greet everyone with a warm hello, all to no response or acknowledgement. One time I heard Nick say to Terry that I'm dumb. I was only a few meters from them. I guess they didn't care if I heard it or not. Nick spoke quickly. Once, after giving me a bunch of instructions, he asked me if I understood. I replied that I only understood the last word he had said. He then got furious with me and took it as a slur against his Arabic background. It really wasn't. "Why are you so slow?" "I'm scared I'm going to break the bottles." He grabbed a bottle off the shelf and hit it hard against the counter. "See? They don't break that easily." In less than 2 weeks, I had given up on even smiling at the customers. I had no idea that so many customers acted as though you have no worth. Once I served a 40-something woman who was with an elderly relative, presumably her mother-in-law. The younger woman made several snide comments about her, to her and myself, about how her problem didn't have many years left. I was appalled. Once a so-so looking woman flirted so blatantly with me, I almost felt assaulted. But it was the nicest I was ever treated the whole time I was there. Another time I was behind the counter with Terry. In walked a woman who had let herself go. She kept addressing Terry and must have said his name about 12 times in the 5 minutes she was there. "I'll be coming back again, Terry. You're going to see me again, Terry. Bye, Terry." She said all of this with a threatening smile. After she left, I looked at him, but he acted as though he was used to it. I didn't bother inquiring upon their history. I had another co-worker, Mali. He had a Turkish background, if I'm not mistaken. He was a tall, well-built guy, stone-faced, and had long hair like a rock star. He had maybe 2 facial expressions. There was one older customer who always referred to Mali as girly, on account of his hair. He'd said numerous times Mali just took it. I never knew what was running through his head at any time. Aside from his rough exterior, Mali was actually quite a good guy. He did, however, appear to be playing games with me. Once when it was just the 2 of us in the store, he pulled a bottle of bourbon he said wasn't selling well, and told me I could take it home with me. "For free?" I asked. "Yeah, of course," he said with no facial expression. He did this a few times and I always declined. One day I turned up, and Nick told me that John would be leaving, as he had gotten a promotion. "He has no life," Nick remarked. Ouch, I thought. John really seemed to like Nick. I felt offended for him. Gemma was to be John's replacement. She too was 40-something, had shoulder-length, light brown curly hair, and a face that communicated that she was stuck on PMS mode 24/7. She barked orders at me. "You've been here for 2 weeks. You shouldn't be this slow." Every word had a trace of venom. She'd exhale the word useless whenever I was near. I hated working there when the mild-mannered John was in charge. Things were only getting worse. There was a new promotion in the store. Nick told me that if a customer bought one of 4 different alcoholic items, I was to scan a code first and then take their money. Failing to do it in a specific order would have the shop fined $5,000. I was becoming dead inside. At the end of that shift, I strongly hinted that I'd be quitting. "Quitting's for losers." I responded in my head with, "Well, you can think I'm a loser then, I'm beyond caring." Panic must have set in. He suddenly started acting uncharacteristically nicer to me. "There are lots of workers I've seen who are even worse than you." What a compliment. "Really?" I disinterestedly required.
Yeah, one girl was such an idiot, she kept asking the same questions over and over again.
At the end of the night, Nick walked me to the bus.
If you leave, we'll have to train someone else.
I said nothing, but thought, well, that's not really my problem. His train arrived, he boarded, and I'd never see him again. I set my alarm the next morning for when the store opened. It was my day off. Jenna angrily answered,
Hello?
Hi, Gemma, I stammered, terrified. I'm not going to be working there anymore.
Huh? What?
I'm quitting.
Why?
The word waiting there for me, dripping with malice. I have other things, is all that came out of my mouth.
Fine, bye.
And I hung up. 5. So for a background, I'm part of a family business that rents band and orchestra instruments to school students. Part of the monthly rental payment is a maintenance and insurance fee, meaning that if an instrument is damaged, they can take it and have it fixed for no extra charge. And if it's lost or stolen, they can pay a fee to have it replaced. One lady, however, was adamant that she would not have to use that fee at all.
Why does it say maintenance on here?
That's a small fee we have for maintenance and insurance. Since this is your child's first instrument, it's very likely to get broken in some way. And when you rent from us, you can bring it in and not have to pay extra for us to fix it, because of this charge.
Oh, we won't have to worry. Anything happens to this thing, it's coming out of his pocket.
Well, the maintenance fee is there just in case, and like I said, if it does become damaged, you can bring it in for us to fix it and there will be no additional charge.
I already said I don't want it. Just take it off.
Now keep in mind that the maintenance fee is only about $5. The monthly rental payment, including the maintenance, is only about $30, which is very cheap for the instrument she's getting. I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't take that off. It's a required part of the contract. We just list the fees on the contract so that the customers know what they're buying. Like I said, if it does get damaged, lost or stolen, you can bring it in and there will be no extra charge. You'll be saving quite a bit of money by just paying for the instrument rental price, all included.
This is ridiculous. Get me your manager.
So I got my manager, my dad, who tells her the exact same thing. Somehow she still didn't get it. So she went to bitch to the band teacher about how we're pushing unnecessary fees on her, and he tries to explain to her that the program we have in place is actually very beneficial. She still didn't get it and ended up taking her business elsewhere. Whatever. It's not my fault that she can't understand that it's just part of the payment. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Adventures in Fast Food and Retail, Subscriber Edition number 4. And thank you very much to everybody who sent in stories for use in this video. Oh, there's somebody tooting the horn. Yes, well done, you have a horn, we're all very impressed. Went out to go down to the shops. Or there's a shop just down the hill from where I live. Quite convenient. At least it would be if they offered all the services most local shops should. Anyway, okay. And went to open my gate, and it wouldn't open. I was like, that's odd. That gate never gets stuck. And it never gets stuck because when they put the gate, and it's a metal gate, and the metal fence that goes with it in, they didn't put the little square bracket with the hole, or little rectangular bracket with the hole that the bolt goes through, so you can close your gate properly. And this was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, possibly more. It's been a very long time, and it's always been like that. I don't know how or why, but I went out today, and suddenly it has the thing on it. It looks like it's been newly added, and it would have to have been added today, because it wasn't there yesterday. So that's odd. Ah, well. Maybe they sometimes go around doing inspections of things when they're doing upkeep and all that. Maybe it was something like that. I don't know. Anyway, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.